Hey, it's Sam with Mesa, and in this video, I want to talk to you about raising the rent and doing a lease renewal. So, after your tenant's been there for a year and that initial lease comes up for renewal, it's pretty common for a lot of landlords, property management companies, individuals that they just kind of let that thing roll over. They just don't do anything with the rent, they don't do anything with the lease. We do a new lease every single year because the laws change every year and our lease is updated every single year by a real estate attorney. And that's really important because if you go back only a few years to 2020, there was a new law that came out that's now known as the Tenant Protection Act, and it required a new, very specific legal statement in every single lease that even the font size is dictated by law that had to be in the lease in order to qualify for a certain exemption, or even if you weren't exempt, in order to notify your tenant of rights that they have under this new law. If we were not doing a new lease every single year, then that would not have been included, and we could have had some issues with our whether or not we were in compliance with that law had we not done that. So we really think that you should have your lease updated by an attorney every year, and then you should have a tenant sign a new one every year. That doesn't mean you put them on a new 12-month lease. You can offer both a 12-month lease or a longer term lease and a month-to-month tenancy if you choose to do that, but they can still be a new lease that's exactly the same with the exception of the start and the end date of that lease. You're probably wondering, well, what do I do with the rent during this time? You should always do your research on the market rent for the specific area that your property is in. And that's what we do. We look at what are other properties that we specifically manage that we've placed tenants in recently or we've increased rent on recently, and what is the amount that we feel comfortable increasing to. We prefer to stay slightly below market. We don't like to raise our tenants every year right up to the market amount because then there's a higher chance that they leave. And you certainly don't want to go over market because then there's a very good chance that they leave. Why would they keep paying more over market when they can move down the street for less? And as an owner, some of your biggest expenses in owning rental property come from vacancy cost. So a tenant moves out, you're going to have to do work to that property. It's going to sit vacant for a period of time. That would be all very silly if you could have just increased the rent $50 or $100 a month less, and then your past tenants would have stayed. It's going to take you a really long time to make up that difference. One more thing as it comes to raising the rent, you have to understand rent control laws. If there's any limitations that are imposed on you, not just at the federal or the state level, but you also need to look at county and city. We know all of those for every city, county that we manage in. We only manage in one state, so that part's easy, but they're different. There's different ones in different cities, different counties. There's different types of properties that are subject to different forms of rent control. It's a lot to keep track of, frankly. So you have to understand that when you go to raise the rent. You also need to know if there's any temporary blanket limitations on rent increases. For example, state of emergencies in the state of California do trigger a anti-price gouging law, which does prevent how much you can raise the rent. If this all sounds foreign to you, then I would implore you to research that or to look into hiring a property management company that understands these things and can do this on your behalf. So make sure you know the laws, make sure you know what the market rate is. The market could easily change, the economy could change, and rents could change. You need to be up to date on that, and we're up to date on that and making sure when we do our lease renewals, we're doing appropriate rent increases or keeping the rent the same, whatever the case may be, so that we can balance out all of what we're trying to do, which is maximize the return for the owner, but also keep the tenants to stay for a really long time and make sure that they're happy as well, because minimizing vacancy is one of the biggest expenses we can eliminate. And that all comes down to how do you handle this particular part of the process, which is increasing the rent and renewing the lease. Hopefully that's helpful. Keep watching for more tips on how to be a good landlord.